Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're refreshed and ready to go. We're now into the home straight of the webinar of the last presentation. Having had the privilege to attend one of his thought-provoking workshops on the Costa Concordia accident, I think you're in for a treat. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Nipin Anand, who will challenge the learning benefit of traditional accident investigations by the example of the Costa Concordia and the story of its captain. The floor is yours, Nipin.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? You can. Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, my name is Nipin, and I'm the founder of Novella Solutions. We specialize in creating a thinking and reflection space in organizations. And I'm a former seafarer. I used to work on deep sea ships where I met with an accident. In fact, not one, but two accidents. And that changed my worldview about what accidents mean. Not at that time, but 12 years later, when I did a master's and then a PhD in social sciences and anthropology at Cardiff University. And then I went to work for an organization that specializes in the area of certification and regulation. And I worked there for about 4 years before I started to see, or 6 years before I started to see a questionable link between certification and safety. So that's really my background. Before I start the presentation, I want to share a picture with you that I took just about 3 days ago. This is a picture of a school that is very close to where I live, and I just want you to look at this picture and tell me what you think about it. Can you see this picture? Can you see my screen?
Yep, we can see that. Thanks.
Right. Okay. This is a school where young children come first thing in the morning to have fun and learn. And this is the image of the school. I just thought it would be so wonderful to start with something like this, given that this is a conference about humanizing safety and learning. I don't know what comes to your mind, whatever it is, it's worth thinking about. It really makes me think. To me, it looks like a cage that invites people in and asks them to be disciplined, obedient, and conformant. Any thoughts from anyone? Okay, somebody's asked me to increase the volume. Can you hear me better now? Is it any better, Sabina? I'm watching your feedback on the chat window. Does it work any better? Okay, all right, good. Right, any thoughts on this picture from anyone? Any comments, criticism, disagreements?
Certainly seems to be a theme of imprisonments and barriers and the like, Nipin.
Yes, it's like a cage. Yes, Richard, you're right. It's about freedom. Where is the freedom? If you look at it purely from a utility perspective, it makes a lot of sense because kids might be playing inside and ball might go on the road, which is unsafe. But I'm sure there are better ways to design something like this. The symbol speaks much more than what you see from a utility perspective. Okay, so I will stop this. It really blew my mind off when I started to look into this picture a little bit more in detail. There's a lot to this picture, and I will be writing a blog on this soon. But for now, just let's just talk about what we are here for, which is I will share my screen, and somebody has to tell me that you can see it. Feedback is...
Yeah, we can see that, Nipin. All good.
Okay, great. Okay, so I will talk about the idea of learning from accidents in the next few minutes using a very specific case, which is close to my heart. And the point I'm trying to make, and particularly in the context of this conference, is that how important it is to understand people involved in an accident if you really want to learn something from it. And I hope that in the next 45 minutes, I'm able to make this argument to you. And there is no reason for you to agree with me. In fact, disagreement is a lot of fun. So please disagree as much as you like. It's where the real learning lies. Okay, so this is the captain of the ship, Captain Francisco Schettino. As you can see from the picture, I don't know what you make of it, but I run a lot of workshops, and we bring him on the screen. He's talking, he is communicating, and a lot of times he comes across as somebody who is so shameless that he does not even have the courage to look at the camera. So he's looking elsewhere. Now, that is an interesting point of view until you come to realize that we were actually using two cameras in the room, one facing him straight into his eyes, and the other one was on the side. We chose to use the camera which is on the side because it had a better resolution when we started to create the documentary. But to many people, that appears rude and shameful. Or shameless, sorry. Yeah. So you can see how once you're involved in an accident, the first thing that happens to you is people destroy your credibility in every possible way. That's how they perceive you. And with strong words like coward, unprofessional, liar, bully, even an asshole, some people have called him just by looking at pictures. And why not? I mean, he is actually the monster of this accident. He is the one. In fact, the accident investigation very clearly states that he is the main cause of the accident. I have never seen an accident investigation report where a person would become, one person would become the main cause of the accident. And I'm so intrigued to write a book on it at the moment, which is well underway. But so what I would like you to do, if you have certain preconceived notions about the captain, I would like you to drop all this for the next few minutes and just join me in this journey to understand this person, because I think there is value in it. And the value really is about learning. So if you just forget about everything about him, that what you know, and he evacuating the ship, or the Moldovan dancer that was with him on the bridge of the ship, and his character and his personality as a bully or a monster, and just join me for the next few minutes and see where this goes. And let's see where we go from here. Okay, so can we really learn from accidents is the question I want to ask in this presentation. And I think we can if we are able to define what learning really means. I don't have a settled understanding of learning, but I will give you some perspective on it, because my understanding keeps changing every day. So we, as in me and the head of Danish Maritime Accident Investigation Board, Oyster Hildeberg, the two of us were so passionate back in 2017 when we met in London. We were discussing about accidents in general, and the case of the Costa Concordia came up. And we thought it would be wonderful to do a documentary on this. And then at that time, the term second stories were very fashionable, and I somehow got carried away by it. And we will see how that works. So to understand what a second story is, let's first try and understand what a first story means. So the first story is what we call sometimes the old view, or the safety one, or whatever you want to call it, in the traditional view of safety. And it's a combination of human error and malfunction of equipment and systems. It appears very quickly after something goes wrong. It is very highly personalized on the worker. It is very low on context and low in complexity, understandably, because it has to be produced very quickly. It sells really well in the news, as did this case. Everything is preventable and fixable in the story. So it looks fairly straightforward. And then contemporary safety science teaches us that there is something called a second story, which is safety 2, new view, human and organizational performance, and so on, where we don't talk about the human, we talk about system vulnerabilities. Again, a very engineering perspective of the world, but dressed in a slightly different way. So this is a story that emerges slowly and after long delays. It is low on personalization. It is very high in context and complexity. Needless to say, it's low on newsworthiness because it takes a lot of energy to understand the story. In our case, it took almost 2 years to build a coherent story. And unfortunately, there are no easy remedies. It takes commitment from leadership, as we call it, to get to something, a meaningful change. So that's a second story. It's not as black and white; it is gray. But what I've realized over the last year or so is that that is perhaps not what learning really means. Learning lies in creating what I would present to you is the idea of a third story. And what is that third story? That third story is basically the metaphor of this duck, as I see it. The duck takes her chance, dips in the water, in the hope that she would find an insect, or he would find an insect, or some food to eat, not knowing that whether she will get it or he will get it or not, but willing to take that chance, willing to embrace that uncertainty. And I think, to me, that is a good metaphor of what learning is all about and what third stories are all about. So if it helps to understand, there's a very personal example here. When I started my PhD journey, I submitted my first assignment to my professor, and she came back to me saying that, yes, that is well argued in your paper, whatever you wanted to say. Now, what I wanted to do is argue against what you wrote in the paper. And that was, I could not understand what she meant by that. How can you argue against something that you believe in, that you have taken so much time to write? And I think if I look back now after so many years, the point that she was trying to make was encourage me to create some doubt and reflection in my mind, that what if my worldview is incomplete or misinformed? So that is one way of understanding learning. And that's why the famous expression that learning never stops. That's entertaining doubt in some ways. And I think the third aspect of learning, which is often missed in most organizations, is the meaning-making aspect of which is very existentialist. But what it means is that, how has my understanding about an accident, an incident, an unexpected event, or a human experience evolved over time? Do I think about this accident of Costa Concordia the same way as I thought when I did my first presentation? And I would argue that it changes, and it changes very significantly each time I am challenged with your questions. So meaning making is important. And in practical terms, how often when we finish an accident investigation and file it, we actually go back to it and ask, did we understand it well? Is there an opportunity to reopen that investigation or a near miss or an audit report and go through it to see how that meaning making has changed in the last 6 months, 1 year, whatever time frame you want to set to yourself? So I think that's something that is missing in learning completely. It's all about fix, forget, and move on. So how do I see this accident, and how do I put myself in this situation? So I'm an Indian person by origin, a non-practicing Hindu. I'm not a religious person, but that doesn't matter. And I was a safety inspector at the time when I met Schettino and I was going to meet an Italian man who was a Christian, but also a criminal in the eyes of many people. So what I mean by learning is how you are prepared to go from certainty towards uncertainty. Are you prepared to go in that unsafe area and explore yourself? Or you want to hang on to what you already know and what you already believe in, which is no good for learning. Am I going too fast, or is it okay, James and Joji?
Sounds great to me.
Perfect.
Okay, all right. So the third story basically means that what has changed in my world, and something I would invite you to ask your own auditors, inspectors, and your own staff, that what has changed in your world, in your own world, since you last conducted this investigation, or after conducting this investigation or an audit, what has really changed? What did you really learn from it? I think it's a very powerful question because it really makes people think. And as investigators and auditors, as site visitors, we somehow believe that it's other people who need to learn, it's not us. And a question like this really makes you think. It's not about that school child who enters into the school who needs to learn. I think it's the teachers and the head teacher and then the school staff needs to learn. Because if you don't embody learning, then how else other people would learn? So I think it's a powerful question. What has changed in your world since you last conducted that investigation? It makes people think. So this is the captain of the Costa Concordia. As you can see from the image, he looks both tensed, but also very close to me. And perhaps because it is the first time that somebody actually approached him, which is what he said when we met him. But he looks very, very tense, but also very closed. And that is something we experienced, I and Oyster, when we spent 4 days with him in his hometown in Italy. So I wrote to him in January first time. I made contact with him on a Skype call at that time. I shared my views about accidents. And at that time, I was actually writing a paper on a ship that has capsized off the Southampton coast in the UK. And I shared my thoughts with him and he felt resonance and he thought it would be good to talk to me. So it took 3 months to gain that trust, which I think is so important in accident investigations, if you really want to understand the person. And his opening statement was that you are the first person, or you're the first 2 people who came to speak with me at a professional level in 5 years. Can you imagine this? In 5 years, the first 2 people who went to see him at a professional level. Of course, he was interviewed by solicitors and lawyers and so on, but nobody from the maritime industry had gone to speak to him. And that tells you volumes about our motivation to learn from accidents, for the lack of a better word. So how can we learn? I mean, you guys are very fortunate that you have a cockpit and a black box recorder. And you recognize that in most air accidents, it's very difficult for a pilot to survive. So you have figured out a way. Obviously, that can be questioned also, whether we're actually learning from that or not. But the point is that here is somebody who is walking alive 5 years after the accident, and we choose not to talk to him. And we say that we want to learn from accidents. And I wonder how. So that's something to think about when we come to think about learning from accidents. This is a picture that we took when we had first breakfast with him on the morning when we met. And after, well, this was actually brunch time, just between breakfast and lunch. And we already had our first interview with him. And Oyster and I were really knocking our head, because in that first interview, as we were recording it on the video, all that we heard was a very objective view of the world. He was very careful with his words. He was talking about physical distances, the speed and temperature and pressure on the day, and a very, very objective view, which tells you the nature of investigations, how we do investigations, and what kind of information we are looking for. So, and wherever he would have something personal to add, he would put a disclaimer there to say, this is my view or this is my opinion. But that is precisely what we went there to understand. If it was about temperature and pressure, we could have read it in the investigation report. But notice how difficult it is for people to speak their feelings and emotions when they are being interviewed in an accident investigation. So that was quite a powerful thing to think about. So in the words of Nietzsche, he would say there are no facts, only interpretation. But for Francisco Schettino, it was only facts and not any interpretation, something to think about, how we conduct our investigations and interviews. There's also something very powerful here, which is maybe not relevant to this presentation, but I would share that anyway. There's a mountain right behind this province. This is the end of the province where he stayed in Sorrento. And this mountain marks the end of the province. And the rule in Italy is that if you are under house arrest, which he was at the time when we met him, you cannot go beyond your province. So he was a great swimmer, but he would swim up all the way up to the mountain without touching it and come back. I find that story very, very powerful. Of course, it has no relevance to this presentation, maybe you think, but yeah. And trying to get to know him as a person, as somebody who comes from a seafaring family. His grandfather was a seafarer, his father was a fisherman, and he himself had considerable experience in seafaring. He had been on all kind of ships. He was a staff captain for many years, for 5 or 6 years, before he became a captain for 5 years. He had also served in the shipyard where you build ships. So he had a very sound understanding of naval architecture, which I'll talk about in a minute. But similar to Rob and Donna, what this tells me is the courage to step out of your comfort zone and look at the world from a transdisciplinary view. It intrigued me. It intrigues me every time when I speak to somebody how courageous they are to leave their profession and do something else because they don't find meaning in it. And that is learning, because you are willing to embrace uncertainty. And his understanding about ships and how ships behave in the water, naval architect, ship handling, navigation was very superior, I would say, as a navigator myself. Now we talk about the personalization of accident and what this accident had how it had impacted upon his life. His wording were that the accident has destroyed me, my family, my daughter, and my brother. My mother, who is 92 years old, asks, when will I have a job? And it's interesting that I spoke to his brother just about a month ago, who's struggling to get a job in Italian shipping companies because of his surname. So that is how deeply we personalize safety. So once you are involved in an accident, it's not just you, your family is destroyed completely. That to us is safety and learning from an accident. Moving on to his Wikipedia profile, if you have a chance to look at it, all that we have to say is that when it comes to his early life and education, I think there's a couple of paragraphs that we could have produced in this area, but we chose to write. He was born into a seafaring family, and he attended the Nautical Institute in so-and-so town, and then worked for the ferry company, so-and-so. I'm sure he has done much more than that. But when it comes to his personal life, we also talk about his extramarital affair with this Moldovan girl who was found on the ship at the time, which I find fascinating. I mean, this is what we have to say about his personal life. In fact, at one point, his daughters and his wife's, I know his daughter's Facebook account was embedded into the Wikipedia, and that tells you something about the dogma of safety, that we will, if you are involved in an accident, we will destroy not just you and your character, but also your family. That is quite powerful. What do you think?
Yes, it's certainly terrifying for the future repercussions and any future learning. I mean, you've destroyed any chance that anyone's going to own up to anything if they end up like this. Will immediately become closed and never be very reluctant to say anything useful. So yeah, it makes it very hard to learn from accidents.
Indeed, because we see the person as an object, not as a person.
Yeah.
This is his dog, and I learned something very powerful about dogs. He, of course, there is enough research to say that a master's behavior can be reflected in the dog, can be seen in the dog, but that research is well known. But what really intrigued me was that he got this dog just after the accident, because he felt that when he walks on the road with the dog takes away the attention from him. So people don't see him with that much of wrath and anger and contempt. The dog takes away all that. To me, the dog is the burden bearer. He is the bearer of all the pain. And that's fascinating because I have never seen that understanding of dog in my life before. In fact, the dog was so close to him that every time we would interview him, even if the dog is, he would bring the dog with him all 4 days to the flat that they were staying. And regardless of the fact that the dog would snore and destroy some of our recordings, he insisted that the dog be there with him all the time. So that tells you something about his relationship with that animal that has helped him through these tough times when human beings refuse to do so. This is a taxi driver who took us back. It was actually the flat owner and a taxi driver both who took us back to the hotel or to the airport once we finished with our visit. And as he was pulling my luggage out, he was very grateful to say that, well, thank you for the visit. And he said, our captain is a good man, please save him. So, against the world that saw this person as a complete idiot and negligent and incompetent person, there was a small community around him where he had a lot of respect, not least because he had helped a lot of young people to go to sea with his influence and networking. So that tells you something about the person also. I asked him, Francisco, before we left, I said, what is that one thing that you wish that you would like to do if this trial works in your favor? And he immediately said, I would like to go back on ship for 1 week or even 1 month. It feels as if some lamppost fell on my head. It was totally unexpected. He said, I can understand and fully accept if it has happened in dense fog, wind gusting, but this was just normal day at sea. It's very powerful because it tells you how little we understand about the normal day at sea, how little we understand about the heuristics, how little we understand the routine practices that go on, which nobody questioned him, nobody understood, because nobody treated him like a person, nobody connected with his unconscious, which is where the explanation for the normality lies. And if you are interested, I just did a podcast last week with a Filipino seafarer, which went exactly the same way. So the question I asked him was where do you want to start and what do you want to tell me? And sitting 7,000 miles away from me, he tells me that he never wanted to be a seafarer, this Filipino guy who I interviewed. He wanted to be a lawyer, but because he was cornered, he had no choice but to go to sea. And I asked him, so what do you mean by cornered? Because that's a very strong word. And he said his father was involved in an extramarital affair, and he had to abandon a family of 4 people when he was 13 years old. So he had no choice but to go to see a profession that he never liked because he had seen his father all that while. And once you get that, once you treat that person as a human being, and once he blurts that out, that is all sitting inside. From that point onwards, I did not have a single question to ask. Everything came out about the accident, about the learning and everything. There was no question asked. You can listen to the podcast. It's very moving, and all learning is moving, by the way. I think that the point that I'm trying to make is that a lot of people raise the question about why is it so difficult to get this language to the senior management? And the answers that I was hearing was it's about the finances and it's about the markets. But I think if you heard Rob speaking, I think in some ways we have given too much power to this language. If you think about it, giving so much power to this language of finance and economics and has actually reinforced this idea even more, to the point that we don't believe that a human story like this would be received in the boardroom. But try it once and see how it works. You might get a very different response because it resonates with people. Anyhow, I deviated from the topic, but I thought it was a powerful story to use in this instance to help you understand that it's we who give meaning to these experiences. Don't buy too much into the finance and the shortcuts or the economics. Think a little bit more critically about it. His last words, and I don't know why he said that before he disappeared. He said, "Remember, money is not the most important thing in life. What is important is building relationships based on trust." And I'm still thinking to myself that what if I went to Italy with an agenda that I want to produce a documentary, I want to write a book, I want to sell some courses. At that time, we had no idea what we were going to do with it. Simply going there to listen to his story opened up a completely different world to us. And I think that listening is what is missing today in most investigations, whether it's safety 1 or safety 2, learning teams or Gemba works, whatever. I think we are too quick to ask questions because deep inside we feel that we will lose control if somebody else starts to say something that is totally unrelated to the accident, like in the case of the Filipino seafarer. But I think if you start to understand this, you will get a very, very rich access to the world, to the social and the cultural world of the person. And to use your own words about cost effectiveness, we can probably do this investigation is in less than 1/4 of the actual time that you spend producing 300 pages reports. That probably doesn't even make sense to us. So I think it's important that we let go of our agendas and surrender control if you really want to learn something. A very powerful lesson from this and many other experiences that I've had. This is, he writes to me very regularly, and this is one of the letters. I will not go into the detail of the letter, but what really intrigues me is that this is the person, this is the same person who was so entrenched in the idea of facts and evidences when we first met him. Few years into the prison, and he has started to believe in philosophy, neurosciences, religion, Kabbalah, Buddhism, Swami Yogananda. And he's talking about an enlightened perspective of life. How powerful is that? What uncertainty does to you, and how people thrive in uncertainty. And a living example for that, as people move from facts to faith, as Rob also talked about, is this idea of tragic optimism, which I will demonstrate through an example. This is the world's lightest canoe that he designed when he was still waiting for his sentence, which weighs less than 5.2 kilos and 5.2 meters and less than 10 kilos. And it tells you how much people who confront uncertainty can offer to an organization. If only we were willing to listen to them. If only we were willing to treat them as like human beings, as people. Here's your cost effectiveness. You can do so much with selling these prototypes, if that's what you are thinking about. He also asks some very intelligent questions from the prison. For example, why do we have such small fire pumps on the ship and such powerful fire pumps on the ships, but so little when the ships start to take water inside? So our worldview is that we need a good capacity fire pump, but we don't question the capacity of the pump when the ship starts to take water inside. We have never thought about it. And these are people who have been through these situations and can tell you so much about where we have issues with regulation and safety. And does regulation actually deliver safety, or is it equivalent to safety? But the skepticism I had for many years as a safety inspector, and in came from him, from the prison. What is tragic optimism? I fall back on Viktor Frankl for this, which is the human capacity to creatively turn life's negative aspects into something positive or constructive. In other words, what matters is to make the best of any given situation. Hence the reason I speak of a tragic optimism, an optimism in the face of tragedy. Very, very highly recommended book if you have not read it. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. I'm sure a lot of you would have. It tells you how we make meaning of suffering. It's not the suffering in itself. It's not the accident in itself. It's what meaning we make of it. And it's important that we try and understand this meaning as it evolves over the period of time, as much as what we know about it on that day. It is a fascinating exercise. I invite you to do something of this sort in your organizations. So yeah, that's tragic optimism. What do I think of this man? What did I learn? I think the first thing I learned was how important it is to understand somebody as a person. And it is important because in an accident or in a near miss or an incident or a technical breakdown, it's very easy to lose your purpose when you face chaos and uncertainty. And some people would call it the competing interests of stakeholders. In those moments, it's very, very difficult to keep a focus on this one thing, that the person. And I think we constantly ignore the idea of who in this new view and safety too. But I think there is merit in understanding the who. The who is not just the captain of the ship. The who is also a father, a sibling, a grandson, a friend, as I saw him when we met him. So it is important that we understand the full person, not just the brain of the person, not just the psychological being, but the full person who has a heart, who has a gut. We try and understand the embodied mind of the person. There's some fascinating books on this. And we try to understand where the power really lies. Where is the power situated? So when you are trying to investigate an accident on a ship that involves a mooring rope, the power does not lie with the captain. So it's immaterial to talk to the captain. Why not talk to the crew member who was present in the situation? Because he has the knowledge, and with that knowledge, he has the power, which he will not give unless you treat him like a person. At 7:30 in the morning, it's the kids who have the power, because as I raise my voice, they slow down even more and don't want to cooperate with me to get to school. So I think we need to understand where the power really lies. For those of you who are married, probably know that who has the power in the kitchen. So I think it's important to understand who and the where when you want to learn something from an accident. And what is unconsciously believed at a collective level? That is culture, isn't it? That is culture, because nearly everyone in the organization that I spoke to so far believes that he's the culprit, he's the monster. And everyone in the marine community believes so. And that is very interesting, because people come to this workshop that I do every now and then. And the people who have the hardest time to understand him is the people from the marine world. And that tells you, how our rational brain becomes so active that he does not connect with us as a person. Our prior knowledge about what he should and should not be doing in that situation comes in the way of understanding him as a person. And so if you ask me, I don't see him as a bully, I don't see him as a monster, I don't see him as a coward person. I see him as a human being, just like you and me, who was caught in a situation and did certain things, which I think, given the situation, some of us might do something very similar. So back to the question, what is learning? I think learning is going back to the metaphor of the duck. It's about embracing uncertainty. It's about thinking about that third story, thinking about not the accident investigation report or what the new view has brought to me, but what meaning I made of it. Is the meaning making of the accident, and how has it changed over time? That is a learning organization. Trusting in the unknown. That is important. How does a Hindu man who is an Indian by birth and an inspector by profession puts his faith in somebody who is seen as a criminal and of Christian origin? So it's important that you trust in the unknown when you want to, and people reciprocate. People reciprocate when you trust in them. It's only when we become skeptical and we want to question them about things that they retrieve, and they become skeptical too. I mean, human beings are mimetic beings. If you do good, you will get that good. If you do bad, they will reciprocate with skepticism also. And the meaning-making side of it. So if you're practicing human error, if you're moving away from human error, all view or safety one, I think, and you want to go towards whichever way you want to go, I think it's very important that we define what learning means. And I think there is value in thinking about learning slightly differently. Learning is not teaching, schooling, disciplining, obedience, conformity, as we saw the first picture of the school. Learning is about having fun. It's about the informality. It's about dialogue, discussions. It's about questioning your own worldview and being comfortable with not knowing everything. That is learning. So the question, what have we learned that we did not know before, is a powerful one if you want to ask yourself every morning. What did I learn that I did not know yesterday? So I leave you with those thoughts. And I think when you talk about human performance, this might be a good photograph to think about. That's it, James and Jody.
Thanks very much, Nipin. That was great, as always. What I thought we'd do from here is, given the numbers, that we could maybe ask people to ask their own questions and turn it into a bit more of a dialogue. I'll open up the microphone so other people can ask their own questions. Do you think that's a better approach?
Whichever works for you, I'm easy.
Okay. If you have some questions, raise your hand and I'll click the button that says allow to talk. I can find it. Do I find the person who's raised their hand? Ah, there we go, Brian. There we go, Brian, you're up.
Yes, Brian. Yes.
So, I've got a dial out, but I just wanted to forward dial out. So, fantastic presentation. I really enjoyed speaking to you earlier this week. And again, listening to you today, I think it's fantastic and really touches the points again of brutalizing, making sure we have the eye and the thou in our discussions, our investigations, and listen to people, suspend our own agendas and let them do the talk. And we get so much more out of it with this humanizing approach. Unfortunately, I've got to dial out, but thanks to everybody. I found it very worthwhile. Well done. So, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Brian. Very nice to have you. Yes.
Righty-ho. Any more questions at the moment? No? Okay. Yeah, I just, from my point of view, I think what we found here in this safety conference is a sort of underlying spread of ideas across many areas. I think what we wanted to get across was, on top of the fact that we need to humanize, the people behind the safety, doing the safety work, needs to read further beyond this. I mean, I don't know what your views on that, Nipin are. I mean, I know you read quite widely, but do you find as you start to read, you get so many more different viewpoints and it improves your understanding so much further than just reading safety theory?
Yeah, I mean, I don't read safety theory, to be honest. I have hardly read books on safety. I read mostly anthropology. I think that's where we need to concentrate. And I really love people who are transdisciplinary by nature. That was one of the things I found in Donna's podcast also, if you want to listen to it. It's so interesting that these people are an epitome of how much they have learned by opening up their minds to other disciplines. And through their life, they have challenged themselves. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, very much. So we did your course on safety, and we went through the Costa Concordia accident, and it was just fascinating to find out how much more there was to it. I think I mean, as an approach, I guess companies might be scared of it because it's quite labor intensive and etc. I mean, what do you find? Is it? I mean, what level do you do that at? Do you do it at very small investigation level, or do you take it all the way up?
I would. So here's an example. If you think it's labor intensive, try this. Think about this example. I have a close friend who is a HSE manager in a company, and there was an instance where, I mean, ships are ships. They're everywhere around the world, and there was an instance where a ship leaves the port and scrapes the jetty and gets out to the sea, and the captain doesn't see the need to inform anyone. It is somebody from the terminal who informs the company and the HSE manager that, look, you've had an incident on your ship, and it's Friday afternoon, and Monday morning, the HSE manager goes heavy on the captain to say, why the hell did you not tell me that you had an incident? And the moment you pose a question like this, what you get is a response exactly in the same way, which is reciprocation. Yeah, we are mimetic beings. Tony Gerard is wonderful to read there. But notice now that 1 week is spent just defending yourself and blaming and finger pointing. 1 week, if you consider 1 week of man hours, both from the captain and the HSE manager, how do you put this where do you put this in your balance sheets? Instead of saying, Captain, we heard from a third party that there was an incident on board. Is there anything we can do to support you? And look at the tone, how it changes. If that's what you're looking for in terms of a business case, how it changes everything. What it takes is defining your ethos, as Rob said. What is your ethos? Now, you cannot get your ethos from templates. You can only get your ethos by looking inwards, looking inside, and connecting with your own self. I think that's missing. So there is no, I think we give too much power to finance and the business world, and we don't reflect enough on our ethos. There is a business case there, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, for sure. There's a question there from Karen in the chat. So how do you balance the person who is the persons who are the victims against the person that is perceived to be causing the accident, if you see what I mean?
Well, I think this is where we have a problem with concepts like just culture. I'm not a judge. I'm not a solicitor. I'm not educated. I didn't spend 5 years learning law. Why should I even care about that? I want to learn what I can know better than I knew yesterday. And that question takes me along the lines of being judgmental, which ends nowhere at all. So why should I be concerned whether what he did was right or wrong on that day? There are many lawyers and solicitors who will do a much better job than me. I want to understand what really led to this. And by opening up this lid, I come to understand how naive is this idea of psychological safety, how naive is the idea of compliance, how naive is the idea of all the contemporary safety sciences. But I would never get access to that if I did not treat them as a human being. I'm not interested in all that, in judging him.
Yeah. It's the intent of the investigation, isn't it? If it's to find someone to blame, then yeah, that's what you're going to find. But how helpful is that?
I'll put a disclaimer here. I know that an event like Costa Concordia can actually be a very challenging thing for most organizations, because you cannot pretend that you want to learn when a ship has capsized. I would urge you not to look at high-profile accidents and take this path. You can actually achieve a lot by looking at small things that happen every day, and take a more humanistic view to it, and see what difference it makes to your balance sheets, if that's the way you want to see it.
Yeah, for sure. I'll just let Donna jump in there, and then I see Neil's got his hand up as well. So Donna, just chip in.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to add to what Niven was saying there, because this idea that we are giving far too much house room really to all of these financial things. But the reality is that those financial things don't take into account what you might describe as externalities in this situation, which are the uncounted hours that staff spend filling in report forms and going back and doing over the work that has to be redone because something didn't go the way it was supposed to go. We never count that. We just count they're very quick to count the minutes that are spent in what looks like a waste of time to them, but they don't count all of the other time wastage and loss that happens, not to mention the reputational loss that can go with these things. And I also wanted to just to add to what Nippon was saying about this, he's not a judge and he's not a jury. He's not there to find right or wrong. And what that comes back to, we always end up in these situations of finding blame, because that looks like the fastest and least costly pathway to fixing this problem. You see, we're starting from the wrong perspective. We're actually not thinking about genuinely changing our paradigm, improving safety, improving quality. That's not actually where we're starting from. That's why I said earlier, we see quality and safety as an antidote to harm or to things that have gone wrong, rather than a good in themselves. Because when you see it as a good in itself, you open up the questioning, you open up the way in which you look at a problem, so that you don't come in with a predetermined judgment that somebody has to be found wrong, a scapegoat has to be nailed to a cross somewhere, and then we can all move on because we've eliminated that from ever happening again. So I just want to add that to what Nippon was saying, because I think that is why we end up in so much trouble in these situations.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Sorry, I'll just allow.
Just one question, James.
Oh,
Somebody's saying that my audio is still low. Is it still low? Do I need to do something still?
Sounds good to me. Well, yeah, I can hear you.
I don't know why this is happening, because I have a pretty good mic here. Anyway.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Neil.
Yeah, hi Nippon, good as always. Just more reflecting on what you've said, really, and it probably transcends across into Donna's presentation about structures as well. And we often focus on organizations such as, the operator of a ship or an aeroplane, etc., etc. But I'm just wondering if anyone's seen evidence of these deep, meaningful conversations happening between operators and regulators and even standard setters. Because it sometimes feels that things are done to the industry, which itself doesn't allow those conversations to happen because it's been done to us. So we become the bottom of a broader organization, and those in power, if I can use such a phrase, almost become a little bit detached and untouchable, and we have to work within a framework that's been given to us. I'm just wondering if anyone's seen any evidence of that beginning to mature and break down, or are we stuck with those harsh regulatory structures?
This is a good question, as expected, Neil, from you. But I think we are very regimented in our approach when it comes to accident investigations or even audits, for that matter. I think the thought of an open conversation and surrendering control does not occur to either a regulator or a HSC manager. I think it's too much to think that if I ask that person, okay, where do you want to start from? And if he says something about his father's extramarital affair, how will I respond? Because I don't have a solution to it. I don't know what I can do about his father's extramarital affair. But what we don't understand in those conversations is that, and we talk about nonlinear investigations. That's interesting. What we don't understand is that unless, and we call it psychological safety, which is rubbish also. But anyway, so I think unless we recognize that this is a being, there's a human being that we are working with, and I don't have a problem because I come from the Eastern world, and we look at the person, we look at the entire person or in his personhood. So that thought does not occur to us when somebody responds like this. No, 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 no. You are a professional. I mean, the classic example that comes to mind is, before the pandemic occurred, we had this a BBC video of somebody in Korea who was doing a presentation on BBC, and suddenly a small little child walks into the room and starts to run
Yeah.
around the room.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And what I'm thinking is that to a rational mind, this should not happen, because there should be a boundary between the professional and the personal self. Well, when you hear Schettino, what he says, why we went close to the land, what he says is that I felt obliged. I felt obliged to because the hotel manager asked me to do that. So you have to let go of your rational mind that is so embedded in procedures and checklists, and start to understand the full being, not just the professional self, but the human being. Why he felt obliged. My goodness, this is a completely new area that has come out. And when you look at the airline industry, there are pilots who are known to do that on top of New York, to give a good sightseeing to the passengers. There are pilots who fly very low to the runway on the maiden voyage of the plane. So these things happen. It's just that we never see the human being in this. And how can you understand all this if you don't understand the full being?
Donna, you had something to add there?
Yeah, just to answer what Neil was asking about, these regulatory systems and things like that. I think that all of our systems are caught in a really unhealthy trap that we've created for ourselves. And that regulators are simply expressing at a different level in the system exactly the same thing that we see within organizations. Because as you made the point, Neil, it's actually just, another type of, it's at a different scale, the organization, that an individual organization is just a player, an actor within the overall system. And the regulators are there doing the thing that the politicians, particularly the senior bureaucrats and the general public to some extent want, which is to just give me the bottom line, please. I just want to know, is this a safe hospital? Is that a safe airplane or airline? I just want to know the bottom line. So they want all of this enormous complexity that goes into a system, into an organization, into an operation, and they want it distilled into a nice little pick so that I can go, good, I don't have to worry about that. I can send my mum to that hospital, or I can catch that plane from here to there. I don't have to worry, whatever. And so all of these compliance systems, all of this accreditation, all of these performance monitors and indicators, they're all designed to give us a simple little answer. I once did something for a government department, and I drew a bit of a logic model of how the system has to work. And the senior bureaucrat who was preparing to hand it upstairs to the upper echelons of the department and the minister came back to me and said, Donna, he said, couldn't you give me a simpler diagram? And I said, it's not a simple system. I'm simply representing to you the complexity of the system. And he said, yeah, but the secretary and the minister, they only can deal with 3 levels. We can't have 5 levels in the diagram. So you see, everybody wants it distilled down to something manageable, something comprehensible. And I'm not really sure what the answer is to that, because the average person is very uncomfortable with embracing complexity. And so we're all looking for that simple tick. We all want to see the little star rating on the appliances to know that they're, good value. We all want the little, good housekeeping seal of approval. So I think that for the system to change, we are all perhaps going to have to be willing to step back from this idea that you can just give it to me in, a simple little one statement, and that's all that I need to know.
Yeah, for sure. I think the term I heard the other day was path dependence. I mean, if you create a system which forces companies down a particular route, that's the route you're going to get. Yeah. Got another question there in the chat box from Norman. Nipin, to what degree is the rejection by other professionals a defense mechanism? The thought that that could have been me creates a negative response. My fears are projected onto the other.
Well, this is precisely what I said, that you are engaging, and this is a problem with people who are from the profession mostly, that they don't want to accept, or they don't want to see themselves in that situation. But again, goes back to the same thing, that this is the rational mind. It doesn't think anything beyond that. You don't think for a minute that you could be one of them in one day. Now, I actually created a LinkedIn post in November last year where I gave the example of just culture in one organization, where the captain was, well, there was a conference organized just after an accident at sea, and the company invited the captain to tell an apologetic story about how he created that scene and how he resulted in the accident. And everyone felt so relieved when he did that, and everything was in control. Now, when you interview people who are sitting in the room at the time, yes, they will all condemn captain's action. He shouldn't have done this, or he shouldn't have done that, and that moral superiority that I would never do something like this. But you meet them in the evening for a drink, or you catch them for a cup of coffee, and they would start to confess, yes, this happens all the time. Oh, we do it all the time. It's just that he was a person who was caught in the wrong moment. So I think this is where we have to be careful about what people say and what people do, and interviewing is probably not the best way. And this is why anthropology goes into participant observation and really observing people in their setting to understand what is the person actually saying and how does it align with what they actually do. And so I think the self is divided between what you say and what you do, if that answers the question from Norman.
Yeah, I think so. So there's one here. I apologize for my name reading, because that your name is hard for me. Saying, yes, Nipin, Captain Schettino is a human being. He felt obliged to the hotel manager to sail close to the island. However, the hotel manager did not oblige him to abandon ship before all the passengers and refuse a Coast Guard to return, for a Coast Guard request to return to the ship.
I would request you to wait until April end, and I will be releasing a book and give you all a much better understanding of this. I cannot do justice to this topic in a couple of minutes. But what I can say is that your understanding is very much far away from reality.
Yeah, I suspect that might be the case. Great. I mean, have you got anything there, Joji? I'm just thinking about what more we can go through here. You still got your mute at the moment, sorry.
Thanks, James. No, I think you've covered the points in the Q&A, and you've raised a few of the chat points as well. Yeah, just to endorse Nipin's last point about the context behind the accident. In this presentation, Nipin focused very much on the sort of the human aspects and how it was very personal to him. I think in terms of the sort of the context of the accident, there is a hell of a lot more behind the scenes, certainly a lot more than what's presented via the media, and even in some sort of the more sort of reputable press, what's presented there. So yeah, thoroughly endorse reading the book, or if you get the opportunity to attend the workshop, where we can actually start to discuss, what happened and what we think about that. Really endorse that as well. Donna, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Whoops, lower my hand. I was just going to say that I have a feeling that the experience that we've all had over the last few years, and probably for some years to come, with this pandemic, has possibly gone some way towards changing people's appreciation of the real stories of what happens in complex workplaces and so on. I think certainly my experience here in Australia, we've had a different experience to what has happened in the United Kingdom. But what it has done is change, to some extent, our perception of what is essential. You know, what are essential services? Who are the essential workers in the society? What are the stories of people? In Australia at the moment, there's a lot of showcasing of healthcare workers and what they are going through and how exhausting this is, and the pressure, the extreme pressure that is placed on healthcare workers, not just to do their normal job, but to do it in, you know, yards of plastic PPE and behind masks and filters and screens and so on, and without being able to take toilet breaks or have drink breaks because it might waste a bit of PPE. I think that we're possibly at a point in time in history, an inflection point, where where some of the things, particularly that Nipun has been talking about, you know, bringing a different perspective to how we view how people do their work, a sort of non-judgmental view of it, instead of, I mean, even terms like safety and quality they're loaded terms. They're not agnostic terms, they're loaded terms. And so we don't know how to be neutral about what people do, about just what doing a role is. We always are judging it in some way. We're always measuring it in some way. And maybe this is an opportunity, I don't know, I'll throw that open to the others. Is this an opportunity, an inflection point in our history where we've been headed on a trajectory and we can actually change course now and maybe change the discourse around quality, safety and risk? I don't know.
I think so. I think because it's such a humanistic problem, it's highlighting the fact that our approaches aren't humanistic. So everyone I see in aviation especially is trying harder at the coercion control, more rules, tighter control, and it's not doing anything, because that's not the problem. The problem isn't trying to make people more into robots. You need to treat them like the humans they are and establish support systems for them, etc. So yeah, I think it's probably going to have that effect. Whether we have to wait for something more serious to happen before people realize it is a different matter. But yeah, it's certainly a time of change and potential change. So if we can get some good voices out there and good understanding going and the discussion in the right places, then I think, yeah, we can move on into a new world.
I agree. This.
Yeah, I mean, even on these Zoom panels, you can see managers who were very business-like for me, with their, as you say, with their kids wandering past the back of it and doorbells going off, and you think, wait a minute, we're all human here, and because there's always been a disconnect between seeing that person I deal with as a business function, not a human being, and then suddenly they are. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yes.
Yeah. So is this a good time to wrap it up, you think, Georgie?
It feels like we're coming to a natural close, doesn't it? But let's just offer one last opportunity for anyone to raise their hand if you've got a final question that you'd like to put to Nipun or Donna or to ourselves. Please do so now.
On silence, I think.
I think the call of lunch for some or bed for conscious with Donna, it must be pushing on close to midnight now. So it feels like a natural close, and I just hope
it's only 11:30. It's not so terrible. I turn back into a pumpkin at 12.
I don't know how you do it, Donna, because I suddenly feel the mind becomes so active that you can't sleep for the next couple of hours. So, it's so delightful to see you actually at this hour of the night, talking to us.
Oh, my pleasure. I've really, I have to say, I've really enjoyed being part of this. It's been a pleasure to hear Nipun and also Rob earlier. I've watched the podcast that he had done with you, but there's something about seeing the person live and enthusiastic about what they are thinking and their ideas that, you know, makes you think in a different way. He's changing some of the things I've taken for granted. Just listening to what he's saying, I'm going, oh, okay, that's a point that I never considered. That's a way of thinking about things that I never really considered. So I thank you very much to James and Joji, and also to Brendan for organising it. It's been a pleasure to be a part of it.
Yes, and from me also.
Hours and, you know, to the audience, I hope you all agree that you know, it's a really fascinating session. You know, all three speakers with some great challenges to the status quo. I think that should get us talking and thinking a little bit more deeply and looking within ourselves. So again, on behalf of James, Brennan and myself, a big thank you to Rob, Donna and Nipin. I hope you found the experience as stimulating as we did too, through listening to you. Thanks also to the audience for your attendance, your interest and questions. As I mentioned at the beginning of the day, this is part of an ongoing series of events, you know, for us at BALPA that intend to shine a curious spotlight on emerging and contemporary practices in safety. And it's very much our desire to keep this conversation going and to keep learning together. So to that end, we'd be grateful if you could fill in a short, this is to the audience, fill in a short feedback questionnaire saying what you liked about the webinar, what could be better, what subjects you'd like to be covered in the future events. That'd be really appreciated. So you can find the questionnaire on the BALPA Safety Conference website, which is safetyconference@balpa.org. So safetyconference@balpa.org. And just to remind you, we'll also publish the recording of this session and the presentations as well. So once again, thanks to you all, take care, stay safe, and hopefully see you again soon. Goodbye.